Hello, welcome to another round of the Crazyhouse Team League. This time we have a match between opperwezen and VariantsOnly. I think a couple of days ago I was doing another whole Dutch stream when Crazyhouse was involved in the match. And this time we still have two Dutch players. Opperwezen being the current Crazyhouse World Champion, or as he likes to call it, the Crazyhouse Friend Champion, just as a joke. And VariantsOnly, is he an IM in chess? Oh, he's about 2400, I think, FIDE, maybe a bit more. So I know John Lee often says that Legion Destroyer is one of the biggest improvers in the last 12 months, or 12 to 24 months. But I think since I played VariantsOnly 2 years ago in the Crazyhouse World Championship, I think he's actually one of the biggest improvers, along with Legion. So we have Opper taking black in the first game. Just a short series, 2-game match of 5+5. Let's see what Opper's got prepared. Is he going to go for knight e4 or h6 g5 or h6 g6? They're all viable options. Alright, so this is the sharp one with g5. You'll often see white throw in the move h4 at some point. Although it's usually after black castles. I'd say this is becoming the most common response to bishop g5 in the d4 systems. What would you call it? A torre in chess? Something like that. Torre or Trompovsky, depending on the move order. So I would probably castle here. I think there's nothing wrong with bishop f5 or knight c6 as well. As Opper is taking his time in the opening. He keeps saying that he hasn't looked at opening book in a long time, but he just knows so much about the game. He seems to be good from any position. So I wonder what Opper's score is so far. Is this round 4 of the Crazyhouse Team League? I wonder if anyone can tell me what Opper scored in the last 3 matches. Because I don't remember him playing John Lee. And I think Jasugi's his substitute if he doesn't play a match, but I can't actually remember too many of his previous matches. I have a short memory. So knight c6. It's a bit hard to make new moves after only six moves of the game. So you'd have to expect castles or bishop f5. But Opper's likely to throw in a curveball in the opening. I'm gonna just type in the chat, go Bugzilla, because he has a match coming up very soon, in about 3 hours against Crazyhouse for a place in the candidates of the Crazyhouse World Championship. So bishop f5, probably bishop d3. I think bishop e2 may also be playable. So Crazyhouse is in the chat, he's saying Opper beat me 2-0. So who else is board 1? There's hey Crazyhouse, I see you're on the mobile phone, or I saw that in Discord. I don't think I have to tell you what the score is. So GSVC is also a board 1. And I think I'm forgetting one person. John Lee, and he played against... yeah, there's yourself and GSVC and John Lee and somebody else. But now I forget who it is. So h4, g4, knight e5. Jasugi played GSVC, okay. I only vaguely remember those games. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you what the score was. But there's still one player I'm forgetting about. Oh, the finisher. Has Opper played the finisher yet? So I think 1-1 against the finisher. I think I would go knight h5 here and let white take on g4, take on g3, takes, and then something. I don't know, perhaps bishop at g6 is playable. Knight b4 may be playable. Going for c2. The opper just castles. And h5. Now, VariantsOnly played this move h5 against John Lee and was successful with it. Although, if it's the game I'm thinking about, is that the game where he ended up with his king on f7? And he scored a touchdown, and then he ended up checkmating with 3 rooks, doing a double rook sack on. And I think Clearcast saw the idea first with the rook at e7. Is that the right game I'm thinking of? But this h5, it took me a while to realize, but the main purpose is actually to stop black going knight h5. Whereas I was commentating that game and I thought, oh yeah, well, that's just building up some knight sack on f7 and pawn at g6. But no, I think the main idea is just to stop black going knight h5. So, we're going to see bishop takes or pawn takes. Probably bishop takes. Welcome Abhijit. He's saying opper will win for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm predicting 2-0 for opper, but I think the matches will both be close. So d takes e5. We see this uncovering of an attack on d5. I don't think opper's too interested in saving the pawn because he wants to trade here and then go bishop takes e5. Yeah, Clearcast remembers the game. Yeah, I think he needed the 3 rooks in the end. And sacked them both on e7. I wouldn't mind a queen trade here if I was opper. I mean, bishop takes keeps the bishop open, but I certainly don't think white wants to trade queens, so VariantsOnly has gone knight at d4. And if the bishop comes back this way, the pawn on g4 is hanging, and also there's ideas to play e6 at some stage. So is opper going to go... Well, actually I'm not sure what I would do if I was playing black here. I know what opper might be thinking. I'm too embarrassed to say it on the stream though. Chuck is here. Welcome, Chuck. Yeah, I was thinking something like... I even thought he would sack the queen on d4 first. Thank you, Abhijit. So he's gone g takes, e takes, leaving the bishop hanging, but then there is going to be something with queen takes queen at the right time, or would it just be pawn at d2 and then take it, then knight at e4? Even options to go knight at g2 check, bishop takes, queen takes, king takes, and then he would still have a pawn in hand for queen at e2, pawn at d2, promote, take the rook. That's not even enough to mate, I don't think, with 2 rooks. Anyway, there'd be some mate. Probably just whatever I said first, pawn at d2. So, very funny move this one. Now there's 2 knights attacking the bishop on f5, and opper's just ignoring it. So he's really going for this d2 square with knight at e4. And although it looks like a free bishop on f5, actually white's attack on the black king is very slow. And this seems to indicate that white needs to defend very carefully rather than try and grab material and counter-attack. So he's getting rid of these pawns on f3 and g4. Sacked a piece back. White's temporarily up a pawn, but I think the material is not so important here. It's more the attack on the white king. Probably if VariantsOnly had the chance, he would like to castle queenside, or at least rook d1. Probably castles queenside is okay. So This is clearing the e4 square for probably bishop at e4 coming next. I'm not sure e4 when Opper wants to drop a pawn on d2. Possibly some idea to sack the queen on g7 and then knight takes f5 check. And then, yeah, because I remember these similar themes with the game VariantsOnly versus VariantsOnly, where VariantsOnly had the white pieces again and the king went out to h7 and there were all these pawns for checking, and then the king was running over this way, and I thought there wasn't enough, but actually I checked it after the game. The computer thought white was winning for the whole game. He had quite a lot of knights and diagonal pieces, very similar to this sort of position if queen takes g7 and knight takes f5 is allowed. But no, Opper's not going to allow it. He blocks off the bishop, the g-file with check with bishop at g4. And where is this knight going to go? Any obvious knight drops? Because I think white will take on f5 now. That, oh, hang on, Opper's inviting knight takes f5. What does he see that I'm not seeing? Was it safe enough just to go bishop takes f5? Then two knights in hand will be deadly for c3 and b2 at some point. Oh yeah, that's what he wants, and then a promotion d1 with the d-file open. So he's just going to go, yeah, take the knight back, bishop takes f5. So what to do with the white pieces? Three bishops. We saw a game, was it Crazyhouse versus VariantsOnly, where VariantsOnly was defending with three bishops on g6 and g7 and f7, something like this. And there was just no way through those three bishops. So pawn at d3 giving a piece back, but then taking on g4. Let's see what Opper wants to do with his knights. Perhaps knight at a4. No, more forcing his knight at e4. So what's the idea? He just wants to take back with the bishop and make sure the g-file is closed, with possible threats on h1 and c2. So I like the sack on c2 and then knight at b4 check, because if the king goes back this way, or if you ever take on d2, then of course the d-file is opening up with check. And I think that's just too much to allow bishop takes c2 check. So yeah, I was expecting bishop at d3, but now black is winning on material with the threat of rook at e1 check. And still, just one main defender of the king, the bishop on g7. And amazingly, black has been safe for the whole game. Pawn at e4 blocks out one of the attackers pointing towards the king. Not that it was really that dangerous without a pawn and some other stuff. Ah, here we go. So the threat of rook at e1 check as mentioned before. I guess Opper's just going to pick up the rook here, unless he's worried about some pawn at h7. King takes, but bishop takes e4 is not a threat at all. The bishop can come back from h1. I don't see what the two knights are doing. White has two pawns, but if you take here pawn at g6, then king back to h8, there's no more checks. Yeah, famous last words. I said that in the game VariantsOnly versus Crazyhouse, and then somehow Crazyhouse snatched a draw when I thought there were no more checks. King h8. Okay, what now? It's just a matter of trying to survive. But Opper should have this one very comfortably. Threat of knight at c4. Also, probably just take the bishop. If you're not sure what to do, might as well just take the bishop and then stick it back on e1. G takes f7, queen takes c3. This is Opper's idea. If b takes, he wants to go bishop at, oh, knight at e4. Okay, but he has to do all this with check. Bishop at b5 could threaten rook at d2, so the king has to come up and then cut off this square. So knight at c7, mate. Perfect, perfect finish. Yeah, model game from opperwezen, I think, on how to play this h6 g5 against h4 and h5 from VariantsOnly. Alright, let's see possibly a similar sort of game in reverse colors. Every cute triangle is asking, have you played them? Well, yeah, if I hover over their names, my score's not that great against opperwezen, 9-17, and VariantsOnly, I got a huge score, but that was a couple of years ago, 16-2. He has improved a lot, as I said at the start of the stream. I think Variants is one of the biggest improvers, along with Legion Destroyer, in the last year or two. Alright, this is unusual. Queen c1, just prophylactic defense against queen b4 check. Bishop f5. I would expect Opper to open the bishop on f1 before he does anything else. No, bishop g3. And seeing if he could be bothered playing this check. Does it go anywhere? Well, you'd only provoke c3 if you had a knight in hand already for c2. And then you're threatening knight takes g3 and knight at c2, but the bishop on c2 doesn't do very much. So what else? Queen b6. Not trading immediately. So I wonder what is the idea. Bishop at e4 perhaps? Asking Opper how to defend c2. Yeah, there's some chess openings where you see this funny looking move, Queen c1 in the opening. Trompovsky, I'm thinking of. Ah, Opper just ignores the pawn on c2 and goes for the activity. So what's he planning on? Bishop takes c2. That is a good question. How do we think like Opper? Does anyone know how to think like Opper except Opper? Yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be some knight b5 or knight at b5, but was the idea that if the queen goes anywhere, you could follow it with knight takes d5, and then both the knights are immune because the other knight would take on c7 check? Some idea like this. Okay, so a6, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, the pawn on c2 was never taken. But now if he can provoke c3, of course there's a hole on c2 for the knight. And that means Opper probably wants to leave a bishop in hand in case queen b4 checks, so he can block with the bishop. Very interesting, after 10 moves, that neither player has opened up the king's bishop by moving the e-pawn. They've been busy with other missions. Perhaps knight at e5, or what else would I be thinking? Knight at g5, I mean. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with all the knights at the back, I even think there's nothing wrong with playing f3, even though you hardly ever do it in this game. Knight at c5, e6, just finally opening up the bishop on f8. Does he want to trade this? Think like Opper, knight at c8 on move 11. Knight at c8, did it work? Queen e6, and then what? Put pieces on the most unusual squares. Yeah, I'm half expecting a bishop at g8 at some point, or he'll sack a rook on h7 and then go bishop at g8. Right, so we haven't had move 12 yet from Upper. He's had a long think. So is it a threat to grab two knights for a queen? Queen takes e5, followed by bishop takes c5. Alright, so he's just bolstering this square e5. Then what is the question for Opper to answer? Yeah, I think Opper could out-psych just about anybody by playing some bizarre move, and then people just get scared of some really bizarre tactic that they don't see at all. VariantsOnly saying cheapo tactic, knight takes b7, queen b4 check, and you grab the knight on b7. So it seems to be quite effective in Crazyhouse to sack the c-pawn and then put a heavy piece on it and then do something along the c-file. Because you'd think somehow, you know, with an extra pawn you could block off the c-file, but if rook c1 is coming with tempo, there's not yet enough holes on the second rank to make use of that extra pawn. So, okay, bishop f5. What now? g4? Yeah, makes sense. So bishop g6, I would assume he's just going to go knight takes g6. And then if f takes, can he... perhaps even stick the bishop on e5 rather than trade queens. And there'd be a hole on f7, but the knight is covering at the moment from d8. So Marlon is asking why not bishop g6. I think I just answered that. I would just take straight away and go bishop at e5. So what does black have in that case? A pawn and a knight. Yeah, I mean the queen is still covering d2 in case bishop at e5 is played. Queen takes f4, you're just winning a piece for nothing. I feel like with the time taken, that VariantsOnly does see a lot of Opper's tricks. It's just Opper always seems to see a little bit further. And after the tactical flourishes that either occur in the games or are just left as potential, he always seems to have a better position and come out of the tactics with a better position. Opper, I'm talking about. So bishop e4 instead. And let's see what Opper wants to do on the c-file. So you notice how active both rooks are at the moment. Bishop at a3, and now just stopping this queen b4 check. I guess he wants to grab on b7 next, and it's also trying to deflect the knight away from f7 so he can go queen takes. Yeah, I wouldn't like to be black in this position. I have no idea what to do. Couldn't even suggest a good move for black. All the pieces are so passive. Nothing is anywhere near the white king. He's not getting the pieces in hand that he needs, like a knight for c2, and has to sack a queen. Okay, maybe now some vague threat to take on c5. Even then, the queen will be hanging at the end. And then if queen at a5 check, Opper has the bishop to block on b4. But it is white's turn after all. Oh, there we go. Rook takes h7. He doesn't have a bishop, so what's the idea? Maybe Opper's listening to me and wants to find a funny way to play rook takes h7. Does he want to go pawn at g6? Okay, pawn at d7 check, yep. That makes sense. So you'd not even really call it a sack. I mean, it's a pawn and... Alright, giving a pawn up is just sacked in exchange. Sometimes that doesn't mean very much in Crazyhouse. So I guess he wants to take with the... Yeah, actually I'm not sure. If he takes with this knight, then... Can take on a3, but the queen is hanging. Can you move it out of the way with check first? But then... What's left as a blocker? Just a knight. It's not the piece Opper wants, so e takes is better to avoid this. Ah yeah, okay, I completely agree. Rook takes h7 unnecessary. Because that rook was already just tying up some of black's pieces to guarding the h7 pawn. And there was always potential to trade the bishop and do something on g6 at the right time. Stick a pawn on g6 at the right time to use that open h-file. So queen a5 check. Yeah, like I said, Opper doesn't really have the right blocking piece. Unless he can force a mate somehow with knight at f6 check afterwards, if he goes b4. I'm not quite seeing it at the moment. And he doesn't want to play rook c3 because then rook on the back rank check. And he also doesn't really want to waste a knight for defense on d2 or c3. So, Opper's just in a slight conundrum, how to block the check. King d1 is the worst of the options. There's an instant mate in one, rook at e1. Queen d2, unnecessary. I don't think it's tragically losing. Yeah, that's Clearcast is confirming my ideas that I spoke earlier. Although there may be a delay, but I did say, yeah, b4, queen takes a3, knight at f6. King at e7 does seem fine for black. So Opper down to 15 seconds. It's going to be an exciting finish. Gingerbread Man saying back rank rook check doesn't amount to much. Yeah, it's true in terms of finding a mate. I mean, there is a bishop hanging on f1 at the end, which could be useful also to stick on the back rank, like c1. So black still has threats if he's allowed to play rook at a1 check. Alright, so he has used the knight for defense. Pawn at c2, queen d2. There's a trade on c5. And what about knight at c4? Is it too dangerous to allow bishop at d7 check? Oh no, it was rook at d1 check. Rook takes, c takes, queen takes. Yeah, oh, he's got a castle. Or is castling legal, or has he played rook takes? Is castling legal? It does allow pawn at e7. But if he took with the bishop, then surely it was legal, I think. But instead he's plugged up this little hole on d7. This is a useful move because we're gonna see a queen trap or no, what? There's a check here, but then there's no double check. So Opper's trying to find a way to take the queen with check somehow, but I don't quite see it. He thinks he has enough defense. Wow. All VariantsOnly needs is a pawn for d2, but he doesn't have the right piece. So perhaps stick the rook first and then see what Opper blocks with. He doesn't want to let this knight move because then the bishop is covering d2. Wow, he thinks he's got nothing. Rook at e7. King has to take. There's a discovered check, but if black puts a piece on d6, maybe he's safe. Knight takes b7, even pawn down to d6. What's Opper's idea? What's he playing at this time? I don't get this move. Oh, knight takes d5 check? What? Okay, I'm missing something. Oh, it was bishop takes, and then knight takes d5 and knight at f5. Was that the idea? That was very tricky. VariantsOnly might even have this game in the bag, because he's up a huge amount of material still with threats on the king, with bishop moving away or knight at c2. So block with the small piece, or unless king h7 is okay. Knight f8, king h6, run down this way. Yeah, the rook is now shut out, so probably king h5. Ah, well, I was just going to say the rook can't come back, but the knight on h7 is blocking the rook from reaching h8, even if it was a check. So Opper's trying to come back with the bishop on d2. Maybe Opper's found a mate in 16, like he was talking about on Discord. But I think he is going to run out of checks very soon. White resign, pawn at h3, king f5. Really no more checks there. Yeah, knight at c2 is going to mate. So well done, VariantsOnly. Score is 1-all, and we want to see some more games, but that's it. I wonder where the critical moment was. 29, knight takes e6, says Clearcast. Let's go back to there. I think it's already too late here. So very interesting move, pawn at d6 check. And I think the idea was to trade a knight here and then do some sort of a sequence with knight takes d5 and knight at f5 check. But Clearcast says knight takes e6 check, and then he says taking on d6 if blocking. So if pawn to d6, then bishop takes d6. I suppose you have to take with the pawn, and then bishop takes check. The knight's still on e6, so let's say one of the rooks takes, knight at... Oh, you can use the knight here. Knight takes d5 check. And then it's queen at f5 or queen at e8. And if this rook takes, then... Well, at the least you could just go queen at h8, pawn at e7. Hang on, the knight's already here. So it's stopping f8. Yeah, let's get rid of these arrows. So knight takes e6 check. Let's see. Does it help to block with a piece? Otherwise, that could just be an instant win. Because if you block with anything, you still have to take it back with the c-pawn and allow this bishop takes d8 check. And because the knight's on e6, it means the king can't take. King can never run to f8. If it ever goes forwards, then queen at f5 is mating. Yeah, no, looks good. Looks good. Knight takes e6. Very good move. So what was better about knight takes e6? Because it removes the defender of d5. That's the main idea. And possibly stopping king f8, although it could even be a mate anyway. But the main idea, so knight takes d5, is just completely deadly after d6. Do you even have to take? Can you just go knight takes d5 check straight away? I think that's also good enough, isn't it? Just go knight takes d5 check. I can't really see the king getting away this way via d7 and c6. So it seems like, from VariantsOnly's point of view, if he knew survival was essential here, and there was a real threat. So the question I asked before, is it legal to castle? I have to go to the analysis board and see if it lets me castle. Yeah, okay. And the other question is it a good move? Someone's analysing the game already. And I think it was the previous position where I thought there'd be some pawn at e7. And sometimes you react with a knight move, like knight c6, pawn takes, rook takes, because there are no more pawns for e7. And then with just 2 rooks and a queen, I'm not sure how you invade this castle position. Because if you go pawn at h7, the bishop can come back to h7. Although black doesn't have a lot in hand, only a queen. So, yeah, variance only 1 because Opper was going for some tricky mate with pawn at d6. It didn't quite work. And he had that extra knight in hand already. So, okay, so there's no immediate threat. So perhaps white can do a more clever move and just go rook at h1. That's an Opper move, isn't it? Rook at h1. So it almost looks like you're getting mated here and then you go rook at h1. Yeah, I'm not sure how black defends this. Probably has to go queen at h7, or can you bring the bishop back to h7 and let white take I don't know, bishop somewhere. You have to play pawn g6. Anyway, this list just looks completely winning for white after pawn at h5. Castling I don't think is good enough as a defense. What about knight c6? Does that survive for a few moves at least? So you try and have time to play bishop takes d1. Yeah, maybe this is the best defense, knight c6. Ah yeah, so that now I see the computer's recommending knight c6 as I've highlighted, and then its line is rook at h5, and then anyway, whatever, the game goes on. But it's thinking it's pretty equal. White has maybe a slight advantage. And yeah, a very sharp game, I mean, full of blunders as you'd expect. So it seems like this is one critical position, but they're already in pretty desperate time trouble. So pawn at d7 blunder. This is normally the position where you have to find an absolutely precise move. And you also, with 18 seconds, you have to calculate all the checks and all the drops, and it's very difficult to do. So it's perfectly understandable why VariantsOnly wanted to defend the d7 square and stop pawn at d7, because the rook check did look dangerous. Perhaps the computer is seeing you can run out to f6 and g6 if needed. But yeah, pawn at c2 was the more aggressive option. And then it's still saying about equal. Alright, I think I might stop here. So we are planning to do a double stream, John Lee and I, to commentate on the big match coming up in about 2 and a bit hours at 1200 midday UTC. There will be a Crazyhouse World Championship elimination match between Clearcast and the Aussie Bugzilla. And that will be a 10-game series of 3+2, and hopefully we'll get the voice call working and the streams going on at the same time. But we have to set that up in advance because I have to make room, play around with these graphics and make room for John Lee's video. Alright, so I'll stop it here. Well played in the second game, VariantsOnly, 1 game all, Opera and VariantsOnly. And we'll see you very soon.